Yes, I think it's time to start. It's 4 o'clock, so let's dive straight into it. First of all, welcome everyone. My name is Kiki. I'll be hosting this Info Agile webinar. We're going to talk today about Agile working with a focus on backlog and stakeholder management. It's great to see that so many of you guys have interest in the topic. And this is one of the fourth. This is the fourth webinar that we've done as Info, and for now, one of the last ones. So at the end, if you guys have input and feedback, please let us know. I'll start with the agenda. I will first introduce you to some household messages, and I'll give a short introduction to Info, and then in the end, we are going to talk about the topic that we all came here for, the Agile Principles, and using them to reflect upon backlog and stakeholder management. So first, the household messages. This webinar will be recorded, and after the webinar, the link will be shared with you. So there's no need for elaborate notes, well, you're obviously allowed to, but everything will be shared with you. If you have a question during the webinar, please type it into the chat. If you move your mouse, you'll see it at the bottom. And I will try to bring this up in the conversation that Robin and Oebe will have. So at some points, I will interrupt them and try to ask the questions that you guys have. So then we continue to who are we? Oebe is one of our speakers today. Oebe is a Scrum Master for two teams we have at Info. For client Graydon. Graydon does financial reports. Then Robin Kolen. Robin is Scrum Master for NS Stations teams that we have. Those are two teams that are currently working on Oebe feeds, their back end and front end apps. And then I'm Kiki. I'm a Scrum Master for the project that we do for Stadsbank van Lening, a bond bank here in Amsterdam. And I'm also a designer for that team. So who is Info and what kind of company are we? First of all, Info is a full service agency. We've been working from Amsterdam for the last 25 years. And we try to create successful innovations and end-to-end solutions for our clients. But what does end-to-end look like for us as Info? We have divided our full way of working into three different areas: advisory, strategy, and delivery. And in each of those stages, we focus on different things. So in advisory, we focus on innovation and vision, roadmaps. In strategy, we design new products and services. And in delivery, we develop high-end tailored solutions for our clients. We do this in an agile delivery way. So we combine design, lean innovation, and agile working with different methods to develop digital solutions. Often this includes a sprint zero, where we define the different things we want to accomplish for the client. Then we get prioritized and structure the backlog, and we start adding value to the project every sprint by building in small iterations. But Oebe and Robin will tell you a lot more about these things and our way of working. So I'll give the word to Oebe.
Yeah, thanks, Kiki. Like Kiki said, we are working with Agile and Scrum frameworks, and I suppose that most of you know these frameworks a bit, at least, and will recognize these four sentences. The Agile manifesto, but what a lot of people don't know, that behind these four sentences there are 12 Agile principles, which are, of course, visible on the beautiful Agile Manifesto website, which we shamelessly copied here. And we're going to use them as a guideline for this webinar. Why did we choose for these 12 ones? Because we see that a lot of teams work with Scrum, but often don't use the full manifesto, the Agile manifesto, to its full extent. And then, of course, this will result in a bit lesser valuable product. There are multiple ways, multiple perspectives to look at these 12 principles. One of them is the team perspective, which is of course very important and managed by the Scrum Master. But we're not going to talk about this perspective today. Maybe in another webinar, we are going to take a look at the 12 principles from two other perspectives, the stakeholder management perspective and the backlog management perspective. And these two perspectives are mostly managed by the product owner. And of course, as a Scrum Master, it is your role to help the product owner work in an agile way. So there's a big role for Scrum Masters as well there. Okay, so we'll start with Agile Principle number 1. Are you ready, Robin?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that's great. Number 1 is business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project.
Yeah, so what we consider here is how do we involve the business, the PO, the stakeholders, make them feel in control of everything. And so one of the things we did to accomplish this is invite stakeholders. That can be business information managers, business consultants, software architects, testers, any kind of stakeholder to work from our office and be surrounded by the team. That creates visibility, two-way visibility, and it takes away, puts a lower threshold on asking questions and starting discussions. We've seen this really worked between the team and the stakeholders to actually get more interaction and get them more involved. We've also noticed that sometimes it's hard for stakeholders to make it to our sprint reviews, which is something we really like. But sometimes it's due to travel time. Whenever we don't hold a review at the location of the client, it can be hard. So we usually offer the possibility to call in through a video conferencing service, so they can still attend and still give feedback. Of course, now in Corona times, we only do virtual reviews, and so that's really, really good that we already had a lot of that in place, and stakeholders were already used to that. So it's easier to now continue working the way we work. So our main takeaway of this is that you should really invite your main stakeholders to work next to your team. The next principle is the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation.
Yes, I'll pick this one up. Yeah, so it's about really telling what you need and not writing it down. Maybe you remember back in the days, there was a huge phase up front where we created a functional plan, a big written document, and then maybe even a technical plan, and then in the end, it was up to the development team. So they got the plan and they had to read it, and of course they misunderstood it completely, but they were building it from written text, and we found out, Agile found out that it works way better with face-to-face conversation. So the product owner is actually explaining the development team what he wants and why he wants it. The product owner, of course, gathers data from its stakeholders and summarizes it and conveys it to one small story or multiple stories. But you can even ask stakeholders to join the refinement to hear their opinion or their need directly, so that the developer will be in touch directly with the end user, with the stakeholder. And you should choose when to do this. I know that some stakeholders tend overemphasize their need, and so it should be weighted a bit by the product owner, of course. So don't do it all the time, but in some occasions it's a really powerful tool. Okay.
I have a question from the audience, and I think it's regarding the first Agile principle. So Boris is asking, you talk about business people and developers, but what about designers? How do you include them in the whole process?
Yeah, I can answer that. Basically, I said developers. We use the development team or the team. The team we consider the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. And the development team includes the designer. So normally they're in the middle of it. So they're not stakeholders. They're actually part of the team. I hope that answers that question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'll share the presentation as well, because coming back to my previous point, there's one takeaway for this, and that is let the PO or stakeholder tell the story to the development team. Okay, principle number 3. Working software is the primary measure of progress.
Yes, so it says working software. You can show that in several ways. So one of the ways is during a demo, you actually show functionality, you actually show things working. And the second one is making sure that you are actually updating the software and releasing. So what we try to do is we try to show as many of the non-functional, non-technical features during the sprint, during the demo. And for example, in recent sprint reviews where we actually did it online virtually, we used even an Android emulator on the screen to demonstrate the live interaction of the platform we're developing on one end and the app we're developing on the other hand. And it was a really good way to show if I change it here in the platform and then it immediately reflects in the app. And that actually worked. And so we try to show as much functionality like that. Also, we intend to get the demoed features to production as fast as we can and openly communicate about the release flow. So the users that you're demoing to actually know what to expect and when to expect it. So be really open about that and try to get a release flow out that you can actually release every sprint, or more often, of course, if that's a possibility. So main takeaway is demo live interactions and communicate openly about the release flow.
Robin, one more question there from my side. Do you have any tips on how to communicate more technical stories?
Oh, that's a good one. So in the past, we've had to communicate things wanted to, stories that the team worked on that cost a lot of effort that were hard to explain. So we started using metaphors. We had one where we built a gateway functionality that's basically around the whole application that we're building. And so we used an image of the city of Carcassonne, which has a nice wall, city wall around it, and explained that with the different modules, and explained how that is the gateway, that wall. And that way it became a little bit more visual. And we did the same with Docker, for example, where we actually used containers and container ships to make it more tangible, maybe. And that way, the stakeholders that usually don't have much technical knowledge can still understand what we're talking about. And in later points, actually refer to those metaphors again, and then we all can talk more or less on the same level, which was really well.
I have one addition there. Often the developers make a flow diagram, which can be quite technical. So sometimes not so nice to show those in the sprint reviews and the demos. But often we translate that flow diagram in a more low threshold schema, which is understandable for all the stakeholders. We show that in the demo. because often like the first 1 or 2 sprints, you're building these foundation layers, but still you have the demos and people want to see how the progress is. And then with this schema, you can show the progress in just a schema instead of in real code.
Another question from the audience: do the developers demo themselves?
Come again?
Do the developers demo themselves, or do you guys do it, or does the PO do it?
And in my team, I'm the kind of MC of the master of ceremony of the demo, but everybody, all the developers show their own stories, and sometimes with help of the product owner who explains the business case, or with help of our UX designers who have more background insights on it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so our 4th principle is the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams.
Yes. Let me. Yeah. So I think the most important thing here is self-organizing, and that means you have to give the team a lot of responsibility. And how can you do that? Well, one way is to really get them involved into the whole process of the project, and not only the sprint. Because sometimes within Scrum we tend to just focus on the sprint and the next sprint, but it's way better if the team sees the bigger picture of the whole project. So what we now do is every 2 or 3 sprints we have a short session where we kind of zoom out and check the remaining backlog, the architecture, dependencies. We can add stakeholders to that meeting as well, so everybody knows what we have done and where we're going to in the next couple of sprints, and that gives them a lot of space, a lot of responsibility, of course, but a lot of space as well to find better solutions on quite a big scale. Next to that, we one of our stakeholders is the enterprise architect, and we have an alignment with him every sprint, so every 2 weeks in our case.
Yeah. The same with NS. In larger organizations, you usually have enterprise architects, other types of architects that are involved, domain architects, solution architects. You need to involve them early on, but you also want a self-steering team. You need to create some room for the team to come up with their own solutions. And we've had these sessions as well where we just retreat with the team and just look at the bigger picture. And with the team, I obviously include the PO here, and we take a step back and look at the bigger picture. In case your project is really dependent on architects, then you should involve them as well in early discussions, because usually if you do that at a later point, it just makes things a lot harder. So
yeah. Agree. Okay, so the main takeaway here is take a step back from sprints for the bigger picture and involve architects. Next principle, number 5. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly.
Yes, our interpretation of this is that you need to let the team reflect, inspect, and adapt. They need to prepare. And you, as an organization, need to be prepared for changes that are initiated by the team. That's, for example, if you're a product owner. In our project, at several stages, it came up that the sprint duration was too short. That came up especially during retrospectives at the end of the sprint. And after questioning this a few times, we looked at it and we decided to switch from 2-week sprints to 3-week sprints. That had quite some impact on everything surrounding the project, like, for example, administration, meeting schedules with stakeholders. They also have reviews booked in their calendars, things like that. So you need to be prepared for that. and you need to give the team that room to take that flexibility, because in the end it's in the benefit of your project and what's delivered. So it should always be an open and clear conversation, but the room should be there.
Yeah.
So our main takeaway would be to prepare for changes that are initiated by the team. The sixth principle is deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with a preference to the shorter time scale.
Yeah. So this is about how often do you put something in production. For instance, how often can you really show something to your stakeholders? And we tend to have 2-week sprints to have this updated very frequently. But there is something very important in this, and that's the thing you have to realize. And I'll explain it a bit with this schema, this roadmap. And
can I interrupt you, because
sure.
I don't see your video, but maybe that's just me or your screen.
No,
Do you
I
see
have
the
it.
screen?
You
I think
see
it's
the
just me.
slides?
Never mind. It's my internet
Okay.
connection.
Great. So back in the days again, where we worked with the waterfall, we had a big phase up front. I made it a bit simpler than it is, but okay. Big phase up front where we do the analysis, so design and plan it, and then we started developing it, which took of course quite a while, and then somewhere halfway development or even a bit later, we had something that was showable to beta users. So we showed it, then we kept on developing. Sometimes we used progressive insights there as well. I mean, that's not completely new, but when the whole development was ended, that was the moment for the big go live, and we showed the product, or we sold the product to end users. So that was the first time that actually revenue came in. And then a few years later, of course, we adopted Agile and Scrum, and we changed some things. We were working in sprints. The big design up front wasn't done anymore. But in some teams, the planning of the user stories wasn't really focused on delivering early. So what happened? We were just doing sprints, and then kind of on the same moment as before, we had something that was ready to show. We showed it to the users, and when it was completely done, we put it live, and we had revenue. So nothing changed from a revenue perspective, and nothing changed from the possibilities of getting it tested more early. But what we want to do, of course, and I'll go to the next slide, which skips the first one. So this was the thing I just explained, the old way. But what we want to do is test more early and get revenue more early. And how can we do that? Well, really focus your backlog on creating an MVP, a minimal viable product. So that is the first thing that you can actually show to some beta users, where you can say, hey, is this what we're making? Is it valuable? So you see a big difference here in the time when we have real users test the product. Maybe after the MVP, probably after the MVP, it's not sellable yet because it needs some more features, or it needs some kind of method of paying or whatever. But that's fine. You will still have a lot of user feedback here. And then if it's a success, you continue building. You work towards a minimal marketable product. And when you get that done, you're able to sell it. So you see that you will get revenue much more early than in the old way, or in the fake agile way. Let's put it that way. And of course, getting revenue is the best test there is. You really know people do want to pay for my product. They will use it. They will not just test it for once in a while, but they will use it daily. So you will get much better user feedback. So this is much better than before, and of course you can still continue extending the product with more and more features, which will make it more valuable. But you will have way more earlier insights from end users, and you will get revenue way more early. So you mitigate a lot of risk in this approach.
I have a question from the audience.
Yeah.
Pal is asking, 3-week sprints, are they only possible for an experienced team, or in your experience can also new teams start with 3-week sprints? So yeah, staying away from the stakeholders a little bit longer.
Can I take that one?
Sure.
So kind of depends a little bit on what kind of project or product you're working on, but the main point is that with a new team, you can be getting to know each other, getting to know the tech stack, getting to know the organization. So then shorter sprints give you way more possibilities to steer, to do retros, to change backlogs around. And if you're in a 3-week sprint, then you're already locking yourself in for 3 weeks, which gives you less flexibility to make changes and to make changes to your sprint as well. So it can be done. You can do 3-week sprints, but for a less experienced team, it's just more advisable to run through 2 weeks, because it gives you a lot more flexibility. In the end, you're going to be able to do the same things, but especially in the beginning, you need that cycle. You need those meetings to inspect and adapt again. And if you do 3-week sprints, you just don't have that much of it.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, if you work with the 2-week cycle, you will have retrospectives as well, more often. So I think that especially with new teams, that helps a lot.
It prevents you from pulling in too big chunks of work, because with 2-week sprints you won't be tempted to take in too much work, and with a 3-week sprint you can go too big, and then you can lose a whole sprint, and it's just a waste of the development time.
Yeah.
And one more short question about this specific Agile principle. Jan Heiko is asking, why do you need an MVP to start user tests this early?
Well, I think that's kind of the definition of an MVP. It's like the first thing you need for a user test is an MVP. So I mean, you can do other tests, of course, as well. You can show people designs, but the most valuable test is that people can really use it, and that's only possible with an MVP.
You can do prototyping and paper prototyping, but I think that's more of a design topic than for this session.
Clear.
Yeah. Can you move on to 7?
Yes. Well, the takeaway of the last point was truly agile means quick delivery, testing, adjustments, and quicker revenue. Number 7, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage.
Yeah, that's a bit of a complex description, but we've kind of translated this into listen to stakeholders and feedback on the delivered product and do something with it. Sometimes we found that if you deliver new software, that's the only way to trigger something in users and make them aware of other ways of doing things and how software can make their lives easier. We've had examples where people were explaining that they were doing processes that would take them every Monday morning 4 hours, where we ended up automating that where they didn't have to do anything. But until they actually saw the first glimpse of what's possible, then they come up with that trigger, hey, so you can do this as well, you can do this. And so solving a really small issue can trigger a chain reaction that generates new ideas, and can generate real value. But for that, you need to deliver something, and that's one of the main reasons you want to deliver something soon, and maybe even small, because it can actually help a stakeholder understand, or an end user understand, what it can actually mean for them and how they can continue that work.
Yeah, fully agree.
So our main improvement, or my main takeaway is that a small improvement can trigger big changes. So listen to your stakeholders and your users. So principle number 8, build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done.
Yes. Yeah, I think this can be very backlog related. So I experienced that some product owners already thought of a solution and put that solution in a story, while you should maybe go back to the problem, describe the problem, and then leave a part of the solution to the team. For instance, there can be a story like, hey, we need an error message at this date field. And then if you just put it in a story like that, then some teams will just pick it up like that and create the date field and the error message. But I think it's much better to go one step higher, to explain the real problem, and then the team can say, hey, we don't need an error message. I think we can just solve this by adding a date picker, where you cannot make mistakes in typing in a wrong date. So even if you thought of a solution as a product owner, always describe the context and the problem that you're solving, because then you give the team the possibility to come up with maybe an even better plan.
Cool. I got a question about actually the previous principle, and the question is, what is your take on the balance between what a stakeholders request, like a new feature, and what is already possible in the system, but maybe in a more inconvenient way, for example, by manual steps? So I think that's a question for you, Robin.
Yes, I'm not sure I fully grasp the question, but I guess if it ends up to the product owner checking what the business value is, how much value does it add to change that clear solution, I guess it is then, into a more clean, leaner, efficient way. You have to decide on the business value of that compared to other things. Is it worth spending time on that? If that's a person can free up 4 hours of his week to work on more important things, then that's probably a very simple business case. If it's something that's done, we've had that in the past, something that's done once a year, but it's ugly, please leave it like that, because if it's only done once a year, it's not worth the investment it takes to actually do that once a year more automated or more simple. So
Clear. Thank you.
Yeah, fully agree. I have numerous examples of this as well. So yeah, good. I was still rounding off. Number 8, I think. Yes, the PO should leave room for the development team to come up with the details.
Yep.
Okay, continuing with number 9. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace.
Yeah, so we think that a constant, predictable pace can be achieved, is more or less, and you can achieve that by doing small, overseeable releases and no big bang product deliveries. So I'm going to tell a little bit about where we did the exact opposite. We did a big migration process for Oebe feeds, and there we had no other choice than to do a big bang release. because there were multiple parties involved, a running system that needed to stay up. So the only solution to do that was a big bang. That meant very long playbooks, really extensive dry runs with all the parties that were involved, and quite a long and a bit stressful night. I was part of that, and I thought it was a really cool experience to have an event like that once, and it also was quite a bonding moment between all of the parties involved, which were way more than just a team. But I'm really glad that we now get to deliver in frequent and small iterations, because I think in the end, you live longer if you do it that way, and you don't die of heart attacks and things like that. So I definitely I tried both, and I know where my preference is. So our main takeaway of that is release often and avoid big bang production product deliveries to live longer.
Next
takeaway. Okay, so let's quickly move on. 10. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility.
Yes, and good design, technical excellence. It's often tied to the amount of technical depth in your system. If you don't have a lot of technical depth, so for the people who don't know, things that are not solved in the most beautiful way. If you have a lot of those, it will slow down the process, and it differs a bit per team how you tackle technical depth. I think, for instance, in my teams, a lot of the technical depth is handled or solved silently, so without informing the product owner. It's usually small things, so I think it's a good thing. A PO doesn't have to worry about it. The development team is really responsible of the technical quality, so it's up to them to solve it. But of course, sometimes there is a bigger thing which needs to be solved, and then you need to create a story for it. And if you need to create a story for it, of course, you have to explain the product owner as well why you want to solve it, and you might get challenged even, like, hey, do we really need this now, because I want to deliver this in this product, and then but I think that's a good thing. You have to make a very conscious choice of solving technical debt, or just leaving technical debt in there because it's not hurting anything. One example where we knew that one of our products had quite some technical debt, but we didn't know as well what the future of the product was. So in the end, after like a year, the product was killed. Then you say, oh, well, we're actually happy that we did not remove the technical debt, because that would be a waste of time.
We have a pretty technical product owner on the project for OpenFeeds. I believe he's here. Shout out to Paul. He really understands the concept of technical debt, and he basically keeps room in the backlog for stories that are suggested by the team, because technical debt stories in the end tend to come from the team. And also, as I mentioned before, we try to take a step back occasionally, and then we look at the overall design of the system, and we see if everything still fits, and if not, we try to make adjustments to it. So that's really something that is part of our common discussions. So our main takeaway of this one is to keep room for technical debt, and either as part of quality or backlog. So the next 11, 2 more to go. Simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential.
Yes, I'll pick this one up. And I think this is this often shows how strong you as a PO are, because you have to be really ruthless about what will make it to the sprint and what won't make it to the sprint. And I don't know if you read the book Product Mastery by Jeff Watts. He has a list of the great traits of a product owner, and ruthless is in there. You really need to choose the most valuable stories, and sometimes you have to disappoint stakeholders. Yeah, that's okay. I mean, it's up to you. You should have the power to make those two choices, and to sometimes disappoint others.
Yeah, we had a lot of unfocused ideas in the start of our project and in the backlog. So at some point, one of our product owners created an epic called Next Phase, and put all of those unfocused ideas in there. And basically, we put a filter on it so you didn't see that epic anymore. And I don't recall ever seeing one of the stories from that epic coming back because someone requested it. So that is definitely ruthless.
Yeah.
Clear.
As you see,
one
here
more.
it's part of the book. Yes, Kiki.
Yeah, I have one more question from the audience about the previous principle, about technical depth. So how do you deal with developers that don't take responsibility for it, or the other way around, developers that already want to solve it, but it might not have the right priority right now? How do you deal with those things?
Let me think about this, because I think I've almost never experienced that developers don't want to pick it up. Of course, you could have a bit more junior developers that don't see that some things are technical debt, but we have very experienced teams at Info, and everybody's always eager to pick this up. So for us, that's not an issue.
You also need to create an environment where it's not one developer, it's a development team. So between themselves, they need to feel that need, because in the end, it's going to come back hard if you don't pick it up sooner.
Yeah.
And so you need to avoid it upstart so you don't have very difficult conversations in the future.
Yeah.
Clear.
There's one thing that we do as well. Sometimes we make a kind of list of technical debt. And that's usually the bigger things where we kind of don't know for sure if we need to solve it or not because of the product, because of the future of the product. But having this list helps us and the product owners as well to realize, where there is some work to do. So if you're going to start on that kind of product again to make like a second version or a third version, then we know, okay, we need to pick up these things that we developed maybe over 1 or 2 years ago.
Cool. Let's continue, because time is running out quickly.
Cool, thank you. So the main takeaway here, was a PO needs to be ruthless sometimes and only focus on the important stuff. Number 12, the last one. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software.
Yeah, so that means deliver an MVP prototype, whatever you call it, as fast as possible and build it out in steps. I think that's circling around. And as an example, when we first started building the fleet management platform for Oebe Fleets, no one really knew what it should actually do or contain. There were some requirements, but the clearest requirements were features that came straight from the old platform that was there. And so we ended up building MVP, screen by screen and feature by feature, and that just started to build out. And one thing I remember is one of the most elaborate features we built was something that was really necessary at the start, which was a very fancy statistics widget. And later on, we ended up removing it because none of the users were actually looking at the fancy statistics widget. So build it fast and test it. And that's actually our main takeaway, to build the MVP and nothing but the MVP first, so you can get your feedback soon, test it with users, and don't waste a lot.
Yeah.
And that concludes our Agile Principles.
Yes, and for all 12. So we took a look at them from two perspectives, the stakeholder management perspective and the backlog management perspective. And we took out 3 key takeaways. Of course, all of them are important, but these 3 really highlighted it for us. And one thing was take a step back from the sprints and see the bigger picture. The second one is focus on the MVP, then the the minimal marketable product, and then the rest. And the third one is keep stakeholders close to get the best input and really manage expectations. Yeah, I think those are the most important things here. Kiki.
Cool. Then I would like to thank Oebe and Robin for presenting today, but also everyone else for joining. Thank you very much. You can contact us on our email addresses on LinkedIn if you want to continue the conversation. You can also hang back with us a little bit, and we can also discuss some things after this. We'll make some other people speakers as well. From an info perspective, this was for now the last webinar. Do you have ideas for any other topics? Are you inspired by the topics we've already discussed? Please let us know, and follow us on LinkedIn and keep an eye out on info.nl/INFOStudio. So the new webinars are also brought to your attention there. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, and then please stay if you have any questions.
Ooh.
So if there are any questions, you can click the raise hand button, right? And then then we can make you a speaker. You can actually ask the question.
Yay, we have one. Boris.
Yay, Boris. Hey, Boris.
What up? Hi, I'm here, all sunny outside, sunglasses on, everything. I didn't want to bother the rest of the group with a question like this during the webinar, so I waited until the end. I'm working at a design agency, so I asked also the design-related question before. To what extent do you also do the design work, so the research, ideation, and stuff like that, within the agile way of working, or is that like a whole separate process that runs parallel or prior to the development work?
Oh, that's one for Kiki.
Yeah, it differs a little bit.
I guess so.
Yeah, it differs a little bit. So most of the time we have what we call a track 0, where we do a lot of the initial research for the client. So we make personas, we make journeys, we do all the bigger research. And then during the sprints themselves, whenever we have space and room, we try to do user research, but also test immediately when we have a prototype available. So for example, when I was working on Oebe Fiets, we were developing a new hand scanner that they use in the bike locations themselves. So we actually were working with the people in the bike locations, scanning in and out Oebe chip cards and Oebe Fietsen. So we learned a lot about the product that we were building, and then immediately took those insights back to the developers and implemented the insights immediately. So it's always a combination between a little bit before, and when we have the possibility to do it before, we do as much as possible, but also definitely during and continuously improving.
Yeah, I think it's good to realize that a designer is really part of our development team. It's not a separate part. It's really really incorporated. And of course, sometimes you work a bit up front, but during the sprint as well, the designer does visual checks, UX checks on the stuff that is made during the sprint. So it's a very important role in the sprint as well.
Okay, thanks.
Cool.
I see another question, but I think Robin has already answered it. So the question is, what will the cost of the PO? What will cost the PO the most time, you think?
Yeah, so there's an article on our website that one of our other Scrum Masters, Eric, wrote, and it's actually got a section about. It's got a really nice image where it says that it's 1/3 on backlog management, 1/3 in the sprint, and 1/3 on the stakeholder. But there's more details on that in the article. And for some reason, our videos all disappeared all of a sudden.
Oh, I got a crying baby in the background, so didn't want to bother you with that one.
And of course, you can always ask us more about it, Ronald, if you want. But I think this is a good start. It's actually got quite some detailed insights on it.
He says he will check it. So
Cool.
I hope it's insightful. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we can conclude at this. Thank you guys for joining, and thank you, Robin and Oebe, for presenting and sharing your knowledge.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for facilitating. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.